Welcome to the Steady On podcast, where God's hard truth meets your hard story. I don't need to tell you that life gets hard. Life gets hard, really hard. But God's faithfulness is still active and alive in our hard. And these episodes are dedicated to remembering and claiming the promises of a faithful God. I'm your host, Angie Bauman. I'm a pastor and Bible teacher, founder of Steady On Ministries, and creator of the Step-by-Step Bible Study Method. But more than that, I'm a trauma and abuse survivor who carried a heavy weight of shame and worthlessness for many years. And I still struggle, but I live in much more freedom now because I know God through His Word and speak truth to the lies of the enemy with His Word. And that's what we do here. On Mondays, we take it in by studying the promises of God. And on Wednesdays, we live it out with teaching and testimony on the promises of God. So thank you for tuning in, my friend. You are the reason for this show. And I'm so very, very glad you are here. Let's get started. Hey, friend, this is a fiction-focused bonus episode with my very best friends, Lisa Wood and Maria Jessup, and our special guest, award-winning author, Michelle Shocklee. I knew we'd picked a good one when Lisa sent us a text that said, "I can't stop listening to this book." And she was talking about the Christie and Selah Award finalist, Under the Tulip Tree. Publishers Weekly says about Under the Tulip Tree, Shocklee elevates the redemptive power of remorse and the grace of forgiveness in this moving saga. And Library Journal writes, Shocklee beautifully unveils Frankie's past while developing Lorena's awareness of inequality. Though set years ago, this title resonates today as many struggle with the same issues and questions of racial reconciliation. With its haunting message of forgiveness, this is a must-buy for any Christian or historical fiction collection. Lisa, Maria, and I simply write, we loved it. Absolutely loved it. I was so looking forward to visiting with Michelle about it, and our time with her did not disappoint. Let's listen in. Good evening, Steady On community, and welcome into our virtual book club winter edition. I'm Angie Bauman, and with me for virtual book club, as always, are my two best fiction-loving friends, and this is Maria and Lisa. Maria Jessup. I almost said Maria Wood and Lisa Jessup. It's
Right.
not that way.
Fix my name in
And
here.
yeah, and joining us tonight is Michelle Shocklee. Michelle, welcome to the Steady On community. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We're so delighted. We loved this book. We were sort of like fangirling before we hit go live. Because we just love it. Yeah, I'll hold mine up too. Maria never has hers because she's either an e-reader or an audio reader. But there you go. There you go. Yeah. So, but I listened to audio too. The audio is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me. Her voice reminded me of Dixie Carter on Designing Women. Right? Do I have the right name? Yeah, she. Dixie Carter. Okay, I'm dating myself. But when Scarlet came out, the sequel to Gone with the Wind, I don't know if you remember, Dixie Carter was the original narrator for Scarlet, and I listened to that over and over again. It just drew me in. And when I was listening to your narrator, I'm like, oh, I feel the same way as I did when I was listening to Scarlet all those years ago. But anyway, I was wondering, would you just kind of kick us off, Michelle, with just when somebody says, "What is this book about?" What do you tell them?
I tell them at first that it's a story of two women and their relationship, and it's the unlikely friendship that develops between these two women of completely different backgrounds, completely different ages. Everything is so different about their lives, and yet they've been drawn together by this event. And that event would be the Federal Writers Project that sent writers out across the country to gather the stories, the first person stories of these former slaves. And that's what it is. It's the story of a former slave, and she's telling it to a young woman who's very naive, who has a lot to learn. But it's also based on true facts. There were writers who were unemployed during the Great Depression, and this program put them to work. And, I don't know for sure that any of them were impacted the way Rena was in the story, but I hope that they were. I feel certain that they were probably at least touched by hearing the former slave stories that they were recording. So, it's the story of an unlikely friendship that comes out of the blue.
How did you find out about the FWP? What prompted you to even know about that and plant the seeds of thinking more about a story to go along with that?
When I was writing my plantation novels, those were my very first books. It's a set of 2 books prior to the Civil War and one after, and it's set on a Texas cotton plantation. And as I was starting to write the slave characters, I'm like everybody else. I've watched movies, I've read books, I've seen slavery and history books and things like that. But I didn't want to use just generalities about these slaves. I wanted them to experience what a Texas slave would have experienced. And my research led me to a little book that was a compilation of about 23 first-person narratives that were collected in 1936 from Texas slaves. And well, lo and behold, there's over 2,000 of these narratives archived in Washington, D.C. And it was from 17 states. They sent writers out across 17 different states. And so that was my introduction to it, was for research for those 2 books. But that research and those stories just would not let me go. And so as I started contemplating what I wanted to write about next, my little research book, that Texas research book, it didn't go back on the shelf like normally. At the end of writing a book, I put all my research away and I move on. Well, that book wouldn't. It would sit on my dresser, it would sit on my bedside table, and I just wanted to read it. And just one day, just out of the blue, I just looked at it, and all of a sudden, Rena and Frankie's story just popped in my head, and I was like, I'll write that story.
Well, we're so glad you did. Are those stories that the FWP authors wrote available are they public? Where can people read those?
They are public. I actually have a link on my website. I think it's still there, but it's just, you Google the slave narratives, Federal Writers Project slave narratives, and hundreds of them will come up.
I'll have to put that in the comments. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Slave
Fascinating.
narrative. You already wrote that down, Lisa. Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've heard you say, or I've read that you've written, is that you believe that everyone has a story to tell. And I wonder if you just talk about why you believe that and why you think it's important to listen to other people's stories and to tell our own stories.
All of us have such different experiences. We may not have what Frankie had that is so incredibly powerful, but I think each of us as individuals, we grow up in different places. I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My stories about life and growing up are going to be completely different from someone from Hawaii or England or China or something like that. And I think that it's so important to know people, where they come from, who their people were. And I think all of us can learn from each other's experiences. And I especially hope that readers might be inspired to seek out those older individuals that they might know, because those people have so much wisdom and they've lived so much life. And yes, we all think we're so wise when we're young, but we realize as we get older that we weren't. And so I just think it's so important to hear other people's stories.
Yeah. I remember when I was a girl, my grandfather was, my grandparents were parents, and they got married in the Depression. I'm trying to say that. My grandmother's name was Lorena. She pronounced it Lorena, but I thought, yeah. And my grandfather worked for the WPA. He was a carpenter, but they put him to work building. But I remember my dad, I would sit on the front seat of the car, and my dad would have one of those, I'm dating myself, little tape recorders, with the little bitty tape or whatever. And he would just drive my grandfather around to different places that he'd worked or lived or whatever, and just record him talking. And then he typed up those stories. And I think about what you're saying, because that's what Rena was doing in essence, right? Like, tell me about what your life was like, because you won't be here forever.
Right.
And we're losing a piece of our history if we don't record this somehow. So
yeah, I mean, if you think about it, this was in 1936 when these stories were collected, and the war had ended in 1865. So these people were in their 80s, 90s, and 100s. So if their stories weren't gathered and preserved by that time, they wouldn't have. And there are also in the archives there in the Congress of Washington, Congress of Library of Congress, there we go. There are also some recordings of, they're real grainy and it's a little bit hard to hear sometimes, but there are actually recordings of former slaves talking about their lives.
Wow.
They're amazing. They're
Wow.
amazing.
And was it at the end of your book? Maybe there's some pictures too, you said, right? Of some of the
Yeah,
more
there's
ones. Yeah.
over 500 black and white
Yeah.
pictures.
Amazing. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Such an important part. I thought it was really interesting. I don't know. We didn't talk about this ahead of time. Just the pushback that was still so present on why is this important? People asking, why is it important? And I wonder, how did you deal with, I didn't pose this to you ahead of time, but how did you fictionalize that tension, if you will, like how, to be able to create that tension in Rena, the main character, who was really growing in her appreciation, but definitely there were voices in her life that were trying to halt that growth.
Well, sadly, I think that still is happening today.
For sure.
I said I grew up in New Mexico and we lived in Texas for 30 years. So when we came to Nashville, this is my first real experience in the South, if you want to call this the South. And there are still prejudices. There are still prejudices here. And I just find it so sad that the things that those former slaves, and I know Rena and Frankie are fictional, but in my mind, they're real. They're real people who experienced, and I'm trying to portray what people really did experience. And, there's still that still exists. There are still people who don't want to sit next to a person who is a different color than them or whatever like that. So, but there's enough research on, all the civil rights movements and everything that was going on here in the South. I've really dug into that history for this book and other books. And so, I feel like I really did capture the true feelings that were then and are still going on in some places today.
Absolutely. And I thought it just really did point to, and I know I'll speak for you, Lisa. I know one of the things that Lisa really appreciated about the book was just that trying to live in that tension. Like when you express a desire to grow in your understanding of racial tension, of race relations, and yet you will do it awkwardly sometimes, right? We don't know the right answers or the right way to go. And we're trying to do the best we can. But then sometimes people, maybe they're well-meaning, but they're not informed, or they're not on the same path, or they don't have the same goals or something. And it's hard to speak to that sometimes.
Yeah, it is. And so I think, I am going to take a lesson from, the way Rena handled it and just push through and meet people who are different.
Yes.
Get to know them. So.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So one of the turning points in the book is when Sam asks Frankie to volunteer in a Confederate prison hospital. And I think that's all. I won't say more. I'm not going to say more, but that's a really big deal for her. And I wonder if you would just talk about that for you as you were writing it, what happens in Frankie and why you felt that was so important. What's the message there?
Frankie had been carrying this whole heavy, bitter burden of hatred ever since she was a child. And I don't think any of us could blame her for it. I just don't harbor any kind of judgment on anyone who would suffer that kind of treatment and not harbor hatred. But I think probably all of us can say that hatred is like this dark thing in us when it festers. And when people have truly wronged us, and I don't just mean, offended us or hurt our feelings, but truly wronged us, that becomes a really heavy thing to carry. And I loved Frankie so much. I didn't want her to have to always carry that. And so part of her journey was going to take her into a really difficult place. And I think that is probably a life lesson for all of us. Truly getting rid of these things that we carry around, we often have to go to a difficult place. And, that was part of Frankie's journey. She had to go there. And what happens there is that she learns to trust God, and I think that's where it all boils down to, is when we're really wronged, we've got to trust God with this thing we're carrying.
And sometimes trust him for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight.
Right. Yeah. Hey friend, I'm jumping in right here to let you know I'm currently accepting applications for the Steady On internship program. I will be bringing on new team members for the step-by-step Bible study, podcasting, newsletters, and the ministry co-op membership group. If you are a woman who desires to grow your expertise in speaking, writing, and ministry leading, a year-long internship with Steady On may be the next right step for you. During your internship, I will help you build skills to grow your ministry as you support me in mine. Details and a link to the internship application are in today's show notes. If you're even a tiny bit interested, I would absolutely love to talk to you more. And now, back to the show. One of the things that we often ask the authors who visit with us, is about what makes a Christian fiction book Christian fiction, because there's a wide variety of how much gospel message is in Christian fiction. I just wondered if you'd speak to that. I know Maria talked about how much she appreciated Sam's character and the way that he witnessed to Frankie. And we saw your writing of how God, what I call tenderized Frankie's heart, like really like over time through Sam and through other events and all that, he just wouldn't let go of Frank. He loved her so much. He didn't, just the way you're saying, like you loved her the way that he loved her, right? I don't want you to carry this. And so I just wonder, like, how do you, as you're writing, make decisions of how much Bible and how much Jesus to put in your stories?
Well, thankfully I write for a beautiful Christian publisher, Tyndale House. And so I could probably put as much Jesus in a book as I possibly could. But, I, as a reader, also don't want to be beat over the head with the Bible and verses and preaching. And so I think it's a very organic thing as I'm writing. I've been a Christian. I grew up in a Christian home. I've known Jesus all my life and really turned my life over to him when I was a 28-year-old young mother with a baby down the hall and understood what the Father's love was. And so it's a very organic thing as I'm writing, but I am also very conscious of the fact that I do want readers who possibly don't know Jesus to enjoy the story as well. And so I do try to create a balance there. And so I'm glad to know that most readers don't think that the book was preachy. So
right. I can't remember who we had on last, and I'm not even sure if it was like, but she was talking about how she would read 2 reviews, not that she reads them all the time because that's scary, right? Like, but one would say there's way too much, preaching in this, and one would say there's not enough, so it's and I think that's really hard. I think for those of you who are writing Christian fiction, that's a really hard thing to do, and you have to follow the leading of the Lord, I'm sure. But I thought that you just did a beautiful job of weaving that in a way that was very invitational and not preachy at all. So I just thought you did a good job.
I'm glad to know that. I'm glad to do that. And I think that's what we want in our real lives as well.
Absolutely.
We don't want to come across to someone and just start, spouting out Bible verses.
Right. And yet the very thing that you kept weaving in was her love of that scripture, right? That book that she had. And because it became so important, not just to her, but for her to be able to share with other people. So I'm going to quit talking for a second and let Lisa and Maria get a question in. Lisa, do you have something on your heart that's burning that you either want to ask or convey to Michelle?
I don't really have a question, but I do have just
something burning on your heart. I know.
Yes. Obviously I am a Caucasian woman, and just have always struggle with the African-American, how do you fit in? How do we bring that into our life in a way that doesn't feel like it's fake? And as I read this, I just kept thinking of Rena. I'm like, I hope I would be like her. I loved her story. I wanted to be her. I wanted to be going into that house, and I wanted to be the one meeting Frankie and having that relationship. And I don't even think I can put it into words how dear that was to me and how deep that touched me. And that is what I mostly got out of the book, was how I want to have that experience. I want to be her. And I just thought you wrote that so beautifully. And that was very touching to me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I think I felt that too while I was writing Rena's character. Even though I grew up in a kind of a diverse climate there in Santa Fe, we weren't all white. Part of my family is, and part of my family's Hispanic, but we didn't know a lot of African American. There was only a few in our high school, and so I've thankfully met more as I've become an adult. But I felt the same thing as I was writing that. I wanted to be sitting at Frankie's knee and hearing that and just touching her and hugging her. So I understand that and I appreciate that so much.
And being accepted there, being safe
Yes.
there, to come as she was. Yeah. And I think that was such an important part. When the book got to the end, and you reminded us, or at least I felt like you reminded us how like actually little time had unfolded, like how, but I felt like they knew each other so well, and so something very special happened in that relationship. What about you, Maria? Something on your heart or something you want to ask?
I shared a little bit about Sam prior to, I really did like him, but also as far as Rena goes, like I loved how she came full circle. And again, without giving too much away, she really fought for what she wanted to represent in Frankie's life. And I think that was huge in her too. Like she wasn't going to just settle for, a lesser experience than what she had with Frankie. And so I appreciated that in Rena too. That was very touching.
Thank you. Thanks.
Almost like she loved Frankie enough that I need to tell the story a certain way.
Yeah.
I have a quote here that's in the book. I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong. Rena finds inspiration in the charge Harriet Beecher Stowe gives, and this is the quote that's in the book. "The time has come when even a woman or a child who can speak a word for freedom and humanity is bound to speak. I hope every woman who can write will not be silent." And you say that Rena knows her articles for the FWP are a small pebble on the path to the peaceful existence among people of different races and socioeconomic status. And I'm just wondering, I loved that quote so much. There was such a encouragement and a strength and also a challenge and conviction for me in it. Yes, right? Yeah, because I'm like, it's like, be brave. Yes, we will. And oh my goodness, that's so risky though, right? Like, and so I just wonder, like, what hope, your novel is a pebble on that path, I think. What do you hope that the novel might be able to advance or encourage or inspire?
With so many billion books out there, it literally is a pebble out there, but I do hope it's going to be a good pebble going towards a good direction of, I don't want to say unity because I don't think that really describes it, but just more brotherly love, just more, what we talked about, more seeing each other, even though we have differences, let's just see each other in the things that we have in common, or just accept the things that are different and love each other anyway. And I really feel like it all boils down to that very, very simple golden rule. Love, treat each other the way you want to be treated. And I think it needs to start in our homes. Children need to learn it from a very young age. It needs to start in our neighborhoods. That family over there looks different from us. Let's go over there and take them a loaf of banana bread or something. It's just, and so if people get to the end of the book, whether they like the book or not, I hope that they will be inspired by just the story of this very unlikely friendship.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, it really is. And I, as authors and people who do creative content and all that stuff, we hear often, probably, I'm sure you've heard this, if one person is changed because of what I wrote, it matters. And I will tell you that sometimes I'm like, I'm not sure that's true because this is a lot of work. And I'm not sure if one person is changed. And yet when I'm aware that something that I have done really does. And so I just, in these 3 boxes, it has made a difference. This has been a pebble on our path for sure. And so I it's just been really important. It's been an important book for me. So I think you kind of answered this already, but I'm going to ask it this way too. What is something that you feel like we can do to help improve race relations and just in our own homes, in our own churches? What kind of encouragement do you give as someone? I think it's very brave to write about it, Michelle. I really do, because I think it just opens us up for criticism when we have conversations like this. And, so thank you for being brave, but with what you've learned and what you've seen, and what you value. What do you think we can be doing to do this better?
I'm kind of glad that you brought that up about the being brave part, because I don't feel brave. But because when I wrote this book in 2018, the book didn't release until 2020. And if you think back to what 2020 was, there was a lot of racial tension that year in our country. And it got ugly, really ugly. And so I had a lot of fear releasing this book. And so, I'm like a lot of people, I choose a word for the year. Well, that year, my word was courage. And, I knew God was going to do something with this book because he had put it on my heart. And so I just had to let it go. I don't know if you all watch The Chosen, but Dallas Jenkins of The Chosen, his thing is just, I don't have to feed the 5,000. I just have to bring my loaves and my fish. And that's what I just gave this to the Lord, is my loaves and my fish. And so as we're talking about race relations, I think it's just so important to not just have friends who look like yourselves, but have friends who are different. We tend to gravitate towards people who are like us, and that's okay. But I think we're losing so much that we could be learning from other people. And so it's going to have to be intentional. It's going to have to be a very intentional thing to go and meet somebody who's different and have coffee or lunch or whatever. It's hard. It's one of those hard things that some of us may not enjoy. It's going to take us out of our comfort zone. But I think in the end, it's a really good thing. It's a very good thing. And I'm preaching to myself. I'm talking to myself as well. So
yeah. We're grateful. Ladies, anything else before I ask Michelle the end question about sharing resources, which I always do, but what else? What am I missing?
Well, no, I think we were touching on it, because even in the book, Rena with her mother, I think a lot of it in the home and, across, if it starts in the home, then you have a better chance of changing the view of a lot of things. And her mother kind of couldn't do that. And I thought Rena worked hard to, not offend her mother, but, you're not right. These people are not like what you think they are. And you have no really experience with these people. And I think we have to start it at our homes and among our, peers, if you will, or, people that we're already friends with. And I know you touched on that, but I thought you really addressed that in the book as well. Yeah,
that's good. That's true.
And I think almost like as a not a subplot, that's not what I mean at all, but the way that Rena was able, she was more motivated than I find myself being to continue to try to have a relationship with someone who felt so differently about something she valued so much. But she wasn't willing to write those people off either, her family that didn't agree with her decisions. And I thought that was like an interesting maturing in Rena as well, that it challenged me also.
Oh, well, that's good.
How about you, Maria? Any other?
Not that I can think of.
No. Okay. Well, here's what I always end on this, because I like to share resources, Michelle. So I'm just wondering if you give us a peek and tell us what's on your nightstand or what's in your earbuds. What are you mentioned The Chosen, but what are you listening to, watching, reading? I'm sure you're a reader as well. Anything goes.
I'm a reader.
What are you learning from right now?
I know that Advent is over.
Yeah.
This little devotional, my publisher sent it to me for Christmas, and it's called The Wonder of Advent Devotional, and it's by Tiegreen. And this little book, I don't know, I think my spirit was just ready for learning something new. And on one of the days, it was like December 4th, the title of the devotional was Prince of Peace. And like I said, I've always choose a word kind of for the new year, and I hadn't chosen my word yet. And last year I chose peace. And this, when he was talking about the Prince of Peace, he's talking about Jesus being the Prince of Shalom. And he started to talk about the meaning of shalom. Yes, shalom does mean translated as peace, and it does serve as a greeting. If you go to Israel, it's shalom, shalom. But it really goes deeper. And all of a sudden I thought, that's going to be my word for 2023. I want to go deeper into that word. And so I'm reading through this little devotional book again. And then I'm going to take the concordance in the back of my Bible, and every day, I'm going to research a new word that was peace, that was translated from the word shalom, and just kind of go deeper into that word and what it means. So that's my mission.
I love that. Yeah. There's in shalom, do I remember correctly? There's like an idea of perfection, right? Like complete peace, right?
Yeah. And it's not the definition of peace that we usually apply to peace. It's just, there's a deeper spiritual thing going on there. So
yeah. I love that. I love that so much. So yeah. Ladies, do you have a word of the year? Maria, Lisa, do you do a word of the year? No. Mine is stand.
Oh.
Yes. When the Lord first put that on my heart, I thought, I don't know if I want to do this year or not, but no, it's good. It's good. There's a scripture in Second Chronicles, I think it's 2017, that talks about you will not have to fight this fight. Just stand and the Lord will fight it for you. Yeah.
I like that. That's
It's good. It's good. So Michelle, we just love you and we love this work. And I just want to mention, Michelle can be found at michelleshockley.com. And I will link that in the comments in the show notes when this is a podcast that drops. And also this book is called Under the Tulip Tree. It's available wherever books are sold. Give us you have one that's more recent than that. Will you just give us a shout out for that book as well?
I will. It's Count the Nights by Stars. And it is another time slip. It is also set in Nashville, but it's in the 1897 and 1963, 61, actually. I'm born in 63, 61. And it centers on the Tennessee Centennial Exposition that took place in 1897. But there's some dark secrets that were taking place. And there's a theme of I see you in that book. So I'm excited.
Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time tonight and for serving us and for this book. And and thank you for those who've been watching tonight. And until next time, peace.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Michelle. Thanks as always to my dear friends for reading and chatting with me again for another virtual book club edition. And a huge thank you to Michelle Shocklee for her story and her time. Michelle's books are available wherever books are sold. This book was Under the Tulip Tree, and her latest release is called Count the Night by Stars, which was awarded the 2023 Christianity Today Award in Fiction for books that they believe are, quote, most likely to shape evangelical life, thought, and culture. If you haven't yet, I'd be so grateful if you would follow the podcast on whatever directory you're using to listen. It only takes a second, and it guarantees you'll see new episodes, including these fiction-focused bonus episodes, as soon as they drop. Thank you so much for listening. I pray wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.